So here's a prequel to a prequel that only really exists because the super generic scary object at its center was the only iconic visual element that wasn't also a giant plot spoiler to an actual good movie that New Line and Warner Brothers are squeezing every last drop of blood out of to create a haphazard cinematic universe, because why not? Everything about this is not only a bad idea, but bad ideas we're by now sick to goddamn death of, from top to bottom. So here's my question. Where did this go right? Yeah, I'm as surprised as you are. This is a pretty damn good little horror movie. It's not great, it's no classic, but in terms of the relatively mid-level bar it sets for itself, i.e. be better than the first Annabelle movie, which isn't hard because Annabelle sucked, versus the even lower bars that most other recent theatrical entries in the genre have failed to clear, it's a pretty rousing success. It's well directed, handsomely filmed, decently acted, and even fairly original in spots. Call it low expectations, but Annabelle Creation suggests that this scheme of spinning off every incidental, secondary, spooky MacGuffin from the Conjuring movies into their own films might not actually turn out to be the worst idea after all. Now, I'll say this for the project, it can't be easy to figure out stuff to do with this property. Like I said up front, the Annabelle doll is really only a thing because, despite being a minor subplot, it was the only monster, I guess, from the first Conjuring movie that you could stick in the ad campaign and not spoil the shit out of the film. Except that Annabelle isn't really interesting or scary in and of itself. Herself, whatever. Now, if you've forgotten the lore, this is not a possessed living toy movie like Child's Play. Annabelle's whole thing is that there's a fairly powerful demon attached to the doll that likes to cause vaguely poltergeistish trouble for people in the general area. So Annabelle herself doesn't actually do anything. It's just a prop you stick in the background that excuses the demon stuff to happen later. The previous movie, which again really sucked, offered up an origin story that the doll was bad because the blood of a female satanic cult murderess had gotten onto it, but Creation offers up a new origin story, and yes, a tiresome final coda explaining that the first film still counts, surrounding a nun and her group of children from an overfull girls' orphanage being moved into the isolated rural home of a former toy maker and his bedridden wife about 12 years before the last movie. You will be unsurprised to learn that the house is in the middle of nowhere, riddled with secret passages and hidden compartments, and features no less than 2 separate rooms that no one is supposed to ever, under any circumstances, go into. Now, that's a standard setup, yes, but the conceit of making most of the main characters young girls, aside from being, you know, a refreshing change of pace in general, does make a lot of the why would you do that stuff that needs to happen for the plot to commence more easy to forgive because, well, kids. In any case, in no short order do our 2 main heroines, one of whom is a polio survivor whose leg brace and cane add a suitable amount of tension to the proceedings since she can't just run away from shit, open one of the do not open rooms, find Annabelle, and unleash all that stuff that would be spoilers if I described it. Suffice it to say, when we do finally get a real origin for the doll, it's really easy to figure out if you've seen one other horror movie like this, but it's also beside the point and not dwelt on because the film understands that its real job is packing as much haunted house, scary ghoul set pieces into 90 minutes as it can, while keeping the characters exactly compelling enough that we don't want to see them get killed and zigging when we expect it to zag. And while it does lean a little hard on what's become the Conjuring franchise scare formula, i.e. loud noises, old school medieval Catholicism style demons, dropping almost cheesy business like monsters literally screaming, "I want your soul," right in the middle of the slow burn classy stuff, people getting yanked off screen suddenly, and you know that one thing where they gradually drop out the ambient background noise and put the characters off center in the frame from some dark negative space on the other side because they know you're gonna look there because you think that's where the monster will be, but then boo, it's somewhere else! But it also has the foresight to pull some plot and character turns that I didn't see coming, including a doozy that arrives at midpoint, neatly dividing the story in 2 halves based on which of the main characters we're following around as the main character. And while some of the gags are pretty typical, they're also pretty well executed and at times surprisingly brutal. How many movies can still make a spooky scarecrow or an old dark well bit work in 2017? Also, while the whole concept of the Conjuring cinematic universe remains a dreary idea in general, there's really only one tiresome groaner of an explicit shout out here, though it's pretty bad. Like I said, I didn't love Annabelle Creation, but I had a decent time with it. 3 stars, worth your night out.